Tonight, taxes, taxes, taxes. The Inflation Reduction Act set to expand the IRS.
If you look at the past, the audits disproportionately impact those that are middle class, upper middle class, income earners.
Plus, the reality of life in Israel. In-home bomb shelters near the Gaza border. And,
like, the damage is done. I don't get to take a pill and have it better.
The harrowing toll of domestic abuse. All this and more on Faith Nation. A massive tax bill adds tens of billions in funding to the IRS. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Caitlin Burke. Big government just got even bigger. Our top story tonight comes from Capitol Hill, where the president has signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law. Formerly known as the Build Back Better plan, the rebuilt bill passed under a promise that inflation would eventually come down due to a combination of higher taxes, deficit reduction measures, and new revenue streams for green energy. Various independent studies show the reduction to inflation would be minimal and years away. Critics also worry there's a potential shakedown coming for the middle class and business owners, since 87,000 new IRS agents will be hired under the new law. CBN News correspondent Brody Carter has been following this story. Brody, how does the massive growth at the IRS go toward paying for this legislation?
Caitlin, first off, we don't even know how much the bill is going to cost. Analysts ballpark the figure around $500 billion, with at least half of that going towards green energy. While the Biden administration maintains the new IRS agents will go after major corporations dodging taxes, the biggest fear is how the middle class might painfully foot the bill. Research and educational institutions like the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C. say the middle class won't escape the incoming wave of IRS tax audits.
Mark my words, and mark the words of the CBO and JCT and many other economists, this is going to impact families earning under $400,000 a year, and it will impact small business owners and sole proprietors.
Supporters claim the legislation will reduce inflation by lowering costs for families, combating climate change, reducing the annual deficit, and by raising taxes on big corporations. One tool to get the money is doubling the IRS workforce, with some 87,000 new agents as part of an $80 billion infusion to the agency. Annual audits are expected to greatly increase under this plan.
This is one new IRS agent for roughly every 1,500 households. So think about that. Every neighborhood out there, every big neighborhood, hey, we've got another tax agent that's going to be employed.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen tried to address the concern with a letter directed to IRS officials that neither money nor the new tax agents be used to increase audits performed on the middle class. The National Taxpayers Union still believes the IRS will target small businesses and lower-income families because they often don't have the money to fight back.
That's not where most of the money is, so they go after small businesses and the middle class, and then people get outraged and demand Congress rein them in, and then Congress does that, and we're just starting the cycle all over again. It's unfortunate Congress hasn't learned anything.
Talk to somebody that's been audited, and you find out that can easily cost you $20,000 or $30,000. Hiking taxes and increasing spending and going down further this road to the Green New Deal, this is going to damage our economy. It's going to harm everyday American families.
Henchman did go on to say the approach here is to double the IRS workforce and see just how much money they can collect, adding the collection process will be quite painful. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Thanks, Brody. Joining us now is tax expert Dan Pilla. Dan, thanks for coming on Faith Nation tonight. The president and Democratic lawmakers insist Americans earning less than $400,000 a year won't pay more in taxes under this new bill. Do you think that's a realistic claim?
No, I think it's false. I think it's absolutely false. The Treasury's own literature clearly shows that they believe that half the tax gap is coming from small businesses. They specifically identify, and I got their analysis and their study right in front of me. They specifically identify the tax gap is coming from partnerships, small partnerships, small corporations, S corporations, and sole proprietorships. Now, Caitlin, by definition, sole proprietorships are mom and pop operations. Small corporations, S corporations, these are small businesses, generally 1 or 2 or 3 members of a small business that operate as an S corporation. The IRS believes, and this is not new, this has been in the literature for decades, the IRS believes that small businesses cheat virtually across the board on their tax returns, not by overstating deductions so much, but rather by hiding income. And as a matter of fact, they state, again, in their own analysis here, that about $200 billion annually comes from underreporting income in certain categories by 50% or more. So they think these small businesses are cheating across the board by hiding their income. And Caitlin, that's where they're coming. They're not going after large corporations. Now, it would be naive to say that certain large corporations will not be audited. The fact is these businesses are always audited. But the lion's share of this attack is coming against small businesses because that's where the money is.
So do you think the IRS will utilize many of its new workers towards going after those smaller businesses, even though they're saying we're only using these workers to go after larger corporations?
Well, let's put it this way. Of the $80 billion appropriation that's going to be spread over 10 years, about 46 billion of that, more than 50%, obviously, 46 billion is going to be focused right on enforcement, including increased audits and collection. So they're going after the enforcement component of this. Now, this is one of my biggest problems with this bill. We've got a tax code in the United States right now that consists of more than 4 million words that was changed more than 5,900 times just since 2001 alone. People need help complying. The vast majority of what we call non-compliance is not non-compliance at all. It's misunderstanding of the tax code. People don't understand, especially small businesses, don't understand what their responsibilities are to achieve full compliance. And yet only 3.2 billion is going to education, 46 billion is going to enforcement. They got their priorities all wrong here, Caitlin.
All right. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. But Dan, I hope we can have you on again. Thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, the hearing over whether to unseal documents supporting the warrant which authorized the FBI search of Mar-A-Lago is set for Thursday. Former President Trump calling for the release while the Justice Department wants to keep it sealed. Posting on his Truth Social site, Trump called last week's search, quote, an assault on a political opponent at a level never seen before in our country, and accused the FBI of stealing 3 passports along with, quote, everything else. The FBI has since returned the passports. Turning to the current administration, the First Lady is isolating after testing positive for COVID. Dr. Jill Biden is experiencing cold-like symptoms and taking the prescription drug Paxlovid. She plans to isolate for at least 5 days at a private residence in South Carolina and does not intend to return to the White House until she receives a negative test result. Here with us now to talk all things politics is veteran Washington journalist Ray Suarez. Ray, thanks for being here. Now, several news outlets have requested the affidavit supporting the Trump search warrant be made public. The Justice Department arguing that could compromise a criminal investigation, while Trump calls the search a break-in. How important is it that the public see that affidavit?
Well, keeping in mind that this is an ongoing investigation, they're probably still analyzing, going over the items that they took from Mar-A-Lago. It would seem pretty early in the going to release the information that they generated in order to get a magistrate to grant that warrant to allow them to go into the former president's mansion. It's too early to expose sources of the information that led them to believe that there were those materials still in Mar-A-Lago. So, yes, eventually, if this makes it into a court, the president will find out how the government found out. But I don't know if this is necessarily the time to be exposing that. It's still very early.
Now, we know that the Mar-a-Lago search is a big talking point, and a number of primaries tonight involve Trump-backed Republicans. Do you think this search is going to be a factor in these races?
For those people who enjoy the president's support, who he's gone out into the field to campaign for, it probably even heightens their sense of outrage that the president's home was, I guess, in their view, violated in this way. In closer races, in races where it's less likely to play a factor, I'm not sure it's going to drive turnout. I'm not sure it's going to really change the nature of the race. The big primaries today that people will be watching involve Liz Cheney and Senator Murkowski. And in those particular cases, who's going to change their mind really about who they're going to vote for based on the events of the last several days? I'm not sure there are that many people.
Now, you mentioned the Cheney primary. She is expected to lose after her leadership role in the January 6th committee, and she is up against a Trump-backed candidate. Do you think that this is the end of the road for her?
Not at all. I think she's gained national attention and gained a national perch from this process that would have been hard for a senator from a tiny state like Wyoming to achieve in any other way. She has been a standout member of the January 6th committee. She is not going to be a favorite of liberal Democrats. She voted with Donald Trump 93% of the time. I think her future is in the resistance to the Trump movement and in rebuilding the party if he's repudiated either in court or in 2024. This is certainly no guarantee that she's got much of a future. She can't necessarily, in any near-term sense, run from Wyoming. But as a national spokesperson, as a person whose opinion is going to be heard nationwide, I think her profile has been raised significantly by this process.
All right, Ray Suarez, thank you so much for coming on.
It's good to talk to you.
Coming up, the reality of life in Israel and how bomb shelters are doing more than saving lives. Welcome back. A nuclear deal with Iran remains in limbo. The United States and the European Union are reviewing a response from Tehran to the final attempt at an agreement after last night's deadline. No word yet on what Iran sent back to the EU, but late Monday night, their chief advisor to negotiations tweeted an agreement is closer than ever, but not yet done. There seem to be differences on several key issues, the main concern being the possibility that future U.S. presidents could once again withdraw from a deal. Elsewhere in the Middle East, the recent fighting with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza highlighted the risk to Jewish communities. CBN's Julie Stahl shows us how one family in her community feels safer thanks to help from CBN Israel.
Galit Kadosh and her family live on Moshav Yesha, one of many Israeli communities not far from the Gaza border. When a rocket is fired and red alert sounds, they usually have about 15 seconds to run to their in-home bomb shelter. During the last conflict, Galit heard the explosion only 6 seconds after the alarm.
We love the area. It's good for us. But you have this situation. Again, you're under pressure. You're in stress. It's impossible to get used to this situation. Every red alert, you get a cardiac arrest and crazy pressure.
Her daughter Ella saw her 11th birthday party canceled last week due to the lockdown.
It doesn't matter how much you live with this and hide, you are panicked each time, and there's nothing to do about it. I, for example, am very, very sad because I had all sorts of fun things planned to do on that day, and it was all canceled.
The stress can be even higher when the alarm sounds and residents are away from home. Daniel Carlson says that's where CBN Israel stepped in to help.
Well, I would say that probably the very top priority for any resident of that area is the issue of security. They know that the issue of rocket fire, spur of the moment, very short notice.
In just over a year, CBN Israel has provided 20 bomb shelters in strategic locations around the Gaza Strip. This one is next to a tennis court about 4 miles from the Gaza border.
We were able to take bomb shelters and strategically place them near bus stops, kindergartens, community centers, swimming pools, anywhere where people are congregating, and so that they can get to a shelter at a moment's notice, because that's the way life is built down there.
Galit says the one placed in her community delivers a great benefit.
First of all, thank you very much. It's not something we take for granted. We have many surprises. You're not prepared or you're on the way to someplace, and we have this shelter on the way. It calms the children and gives them security to go and play a little.
Ella says even though the situation is scary, she's thankful for the protection.
The children in Gaza, they don't have a red alert. They don't have a shelter. So I have to say thank you that we have this.
Although it's quiet for now along the Gaza Strip, residents have the reassurance that if or when rockets fly again, the bomb shelters are here to reduce stress and save lives. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Moshav Yesha on the Israel-Gaza border.
Victims of domestic abuse often suffer traumatic brain injuries. When we come back, why those injuries and that suffering is often overlooked. Hit in the head 20 times a day. That's what one battered woman suffered at the hands of her violent boyfriend. 20 years later, she not only carries emotional and physical scars, she's also suffering from traumatic brain injury. And she's not alone. Medical reporter Lori Johnson reports on this largely overlooked fallout from domestic abuse.
Like many domestic abuse victims, Paula Walters has been hit in the head more times than she can count.
Him pounding my head against the cement.
Often many times a day.
He had a pole. It was like I don't know, it was like that long. And he hit me on the head, especially the back.
Although Paula left her abuser 20 years ago, an MRI showed extensive brain damage.
Like, he still controls my life very much. And my life might end early because of him.
About 15 years ago, doctors discovered football players who suffered repeated hits to the head often developed the brain disease CTE, chronic traumatic encephalitis. Now, researchers are taking a closer look at domestic abuse victims to determine whether they too may have CTE or other types of brain injuries. These diseases can cause personalities to change, steal memories, and lead to early death.
Repetitive insults to the brain accumulate, cause damage to the brain, and then trigger a neurodegenerative disease that then progresses over time, even in the absence of further insults.
CTE can also occur in people who have never suffered a concussion.
Unfortunately, at the present time, we have no way to definitively diagnose CTE in living persons.
The only way to determine CTE is to examine a person's brain after their death. Scientists have confirmed CTE in the donated brains of over 1,000 people, mostly football players, who exhibited symptoms while they were still alive.
Forgetfulness, the changes in behavior, the changes in mood, the changes in personality, and often aggression, violence, homicide, suicide, and the like.
Center doctors have also confirmed CTE in a small number of brains from battered women, mainly due to lack of access.
Intimate partner abuse or domestic violence, where we have far fewer individuals who've donated with this type of a background, so we're in really urgent need.
We have to start connecting domestic violence and brain injury.
Rachel Ramirez, one of the few researching this connection, believes helping victims begins with raising public awareness.
The first people that they reach out to when they're struggling with abuse, it's not us. They're not calling our hotlines. They're talking to your viewers. They're talking to their friends. They're talking to their family. They're talking to their pastor.
Recognizing the risk of brain injury from abuse could potentially motivate more victims to leave dangerous partners, get medical attention, and stop blaming themselves for the symptoms they're experiencing.
Domestic violence victims have often attributed that to either a psychological issue, to there's something wrong with me, to I'm stupid, I'm crazy.
Some domestic abuse shelters are beginning to get involved.
And we do assessments for every woman that comes into our program and ask her some survey questions to see what types of injuries she's had or symptoms she's had.
Questions about physical health, such as do you experience headaches, dizziness, vision problems? Also, mental health. Are there problems with memory, concentration, staying organized? And emotions. Are you confused, irritable, nervous? Counting the number of domestic abuse victims with brain injuries is difficult. Many choose to suffer in silence, and those who seek medical treatment often minimize their injuries or lie about how they got them.
Sometimes women carry so much shame they don't want to tell anyone. It's embarrassing.
Like, the damage is done. I don't get to take a pill and have it better.
While treatments are limited, some brain injuries can get better, especially when identified early. Some things that help are lots of rest, a healthy diet, and most of all, avoiding future head injuries. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
If you or someone you know is a victim of domestic abuse, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline 24/7 at 800-799-7233. Coming up, how late is too late to return a library book? A New Jersey man tests the limits of the phrase better late than never next. Finally tonight, you've heard the expression better late than never. Well, a New Jersey man is making good on it by returning a long overdue library book. Jersey City native Bob Jablonski checked out Hitler by Odin Rudolph from his school library at the age of 14. That was in 1947. It wasn't until recently he realized he still had the book 75 years later. Unlike Jerry Seinfeld, who checked out a book in 1971 and never returned it, it didn't take a library cop to make Jablonski take the situation seriously.
I returned that book. I remember it very specifically.
You're a comedian. You make people laugh.
I try.
You think this is all a big joke, don't you?
Jablonski, who turns 90 in April, doesn't remember much about checking the book out, but he returned it in perfect shape with the original reference card tucked securely inside. Lucky for him, there's no late fees. The Jersey City Free Public Library eliminated those penalties in March of 2021, becoming the largest fee-free institution in the state of New Jersey. It's people like Jablonski who make that policy possible. So that's your reminder. Go return your library books. That's going to do it for Faith Nation. We'll see you tomorrow.